All right, well, welcome as folks are still filtering in. This is the Empower Employees with AI Productivity Tools session. Thank you for coming right after lunch. My name is Apurva Chandra. I manage the modern work business for the Tech for Social Impact team at Microsoft. And we just have a phenomenal discussion for you today. We're going to start off with a panel of a group of nonprofit leaders over here who are doing some truly innovative things with AI to boost productivity inside of their organizations. Then we're going to have a demo. Alicia is going to walk us through Copilot and Copilot for Microsoft 365. And then we're going to open it up for Q&A for about 10 minutes at the end. First off, let me introduce our esteemed panel here. We have John Townsend, the Chief Information Officer from National Trust. We have Joelle Ramjan, the President of Agape Source. Alex Duncan, the Chief Technology Officer from British Heart Foundation. And we have the author, facilitator, trainer, Beth Cantor, who's going to be moderating our session. And before I hand things over to Beth, let me just give her a brief introduction, even though she probably doesn't need an introduction for many of you. Beth is the co-author of 4 books for nonprofit leaders. Her most recent book is about AI, The Smart Nonprofit, Staying Human in an Automated World. She received the N10 Lifetime Achievement Award and has over 3 decades of experience working with nonprofit leaders. She has delivered training to nonprofits and keynote talks globally on topics such as workplace well-being, disruptive technologies, mission-driven work, and the use of AI for productivity. And we are really lucky to have her with us today. So with no further ado, Beth.
Great, thank you so much, Apurva. And before you walk away with the clicker, thank you. Great, so welcome everybody. Our theme today is empowering nonprofit staff with AI productivity tools. And I want to set this up starting with a little bit of a reflection on what do we mean by productivity, right? And I think about it in a couple of ways. One is about, completing work tasks faster and better. That's one definition. But it's also being able to learn new skills or new knowledge faster and better. Learning has been kind of a theme, so we can have AI as an assistant to help complete tasks, but it can also be a mentor and a teacher for us. But I think there's another aspect of productivity that's really important, especially in our sector where we often have a lot of time scarcity versus time abundance. But this is going to give us some time abundance. It'll help us free up time, right? And maybe some brain space where we can shift into focusing more on mission-critical tasks that are uniquely human, such as developing relationships with donors or caring for our clients better, developing better partnerships, being more creative, more innovative, or simply being able just to take a breath and reset our resilience. And that's what Alison Fine, my co-author, and I call the dividend of time. And when we were writing about this, we've been researching and writing about it for about 8 years now. It was this abstract concept. But in the last couple of months, the AI research has actually been able to measure this dividend of time. And there's 2 charts. One looks kind of like a Batman cap. And the Batman cap comes from a very recent study from Harvard Business School, where they gave 2 different groups of consultants to do tasks. Things like writing, analysis, writing an implementation plan, and so forth. Probably tasks that you do or your staff does in their everyday work at a nonprofit. And one group was given AI tools, and the other wasn't. And the ones that had those, used those AI tools or co-piloted with those AI tools were able to complete 12% more tasks, 25% faster with 40% higher quality. Now, that's not just an outlier study, and I think tomorrow we're going to hear a lot from Microsoft's workplace research, but it's consistent with other studies and findings, like the one you see on the right about the experience with Copilot and the amount of time savings and the ability for people to be more creative and freeing up time for more mission-critical work. So to put these results into context, I think we were talking about electricity this morning in the keynote. When electricity was given, not to everybody, there was a 2% increase in productivity. So just think about that for a moment. We're looking at AI with a 40% increase in productivity. But the other thing that I keep thinking is that right now these tools are almost available to at least everybody in this room. And those are the same tools that the people in these studies are using. So we are on a learning journey. And we've been hearing this theme. We're on a learning journey. We're all together on this. Debbie has mentioned this morning about the learning community. Nobody has the manual. Nobody has all the answers. There aren't any experts. So we're all starting at the same democratized level. We're all learning together, and that's really exciting. But we know it can be daunting to get started and to bring everybody along. And the thing is, if you look at this journey, you can start very simply with what Trevor Noah was talking about this morning, with curiosity, beginner's mindset, asking questions. And then maybe there's that wow moment. Maybe we all had a wow moment when Jared Spataro said, wait, you can do this as part of his prompts. And then we have to make that time for individual learning and experimentation. And then delivering structured training. And that includes some of knowing the limitations and the guardrails. And then we bring it into internal workflow and productivity, and on up to maybe some external use cases to serve our stakeholders responsibly but better, and on up to what we're calling the force multiplier effect. And you know, to be honest, like we talk about the technology is changing so fast. The technology is changing so fast. And when I hear that, I get a little nervous. But I know as a field as a whole, we're probably will not see that multiplier effect for maybe at least 10 minutes, maybe, a little bit, right? But we can begin to see the contours of this impact by those who have been at the frontiers in the last few months of scaling AI within their organizations, going through this learning journey, and they all have lots of practical wisdom and experience and how they overcame challenges to see some of the benefits. So I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves, share a little bit about your organization, a little bit about the scale of it, and also an example of an AI use case for productivity.
Thank you, Beth, and hi, everyone. My name's John Townsend. I'm the Chief Information Officer for the National Trust. The National Trust, we are Europe's largest conservation charity. We look after nature, beauty, and history forever for everyone. And we do that so that people and nature can thrive. We have almost 6 million members of our organization. We welcome around about 25 million paying visitors to more than 500 sites that we look after. And in excess of 100 million non-paying visitors who just want a great day in the outdoors. We have, as an organization, around about 13,000 staff, and we also have about 35,000 volunteers who help us on a regular basis to deliver all of those things. And when we started looking at artificial intelligence as an organization, we came up with 4 sort of major use cases that we thought AI could add real value to the organization. And one of those key areas was this question around productivity and how might we use AI as a force for good so that our wonderful people could really focus on delivering the mission and doing the things that, you know, were really driving and delivering that public benefit.
Great, thank you, John. Alex?
Great. So apologies for those of you who might have heard me introduce myself this morning. So Alex Duncan, British Heart Foundation. So I think I talked about our mission earlier this morning, but essentially it's to have a world free from the fear of heart and circulatory disease, which is the world's biggest killers. And we're a large organisation as well. We've got, we obviously fund our research, but we do that through fundraising, but also we've got 700 shops and stores around the UK. So we've got a large footprint. We have about 5,000 employees and 20,000 volunteers. So any efficiencies that we can gain, will scale very quickly. So we started rolling Copilot out last year in November, and we've been measuring it ever since because we want to decide if we're going to expand it. And we've looked at it across 3 use cases, essentially. So meet, which is about how do we use it in terms of meeting with each other. And we found that there's real savings in terms of not always needing to go to every meeting, and you can save yourself some time. And I think we've got a demo later that will show that. We also talked about create. So how do you create new collateral? And we've had some great examples of where we've written a security policy with inputs from other security policies from other organizations, perhaps combined with our tone, and have saved a lot of time there. And then finally, search is the other dimension that we've been looking at, where we're a large organization, we have a big intranet, we have documents stored everywhere across SharePoint, Teams, and emails. And what we found is that it's very easy to use Copilot to be able to ask for, what's the dental policy, for example. So the survey showed that on average, people think that we could save about 45 minutes a day, which is huge. And a lot of that would be around the meeting time. You don't need to miss one meeting and catch up on it, and you've saved a lot of time. So the crude ROI is that based on the license cost and depending on salary, that could range from an 11 times payback to about 41 times payback on that license cost. So it's really big, and we're seeing a huge, there's huge potential for us.
That's right. I think that's really big to save 45 minutes a day and most of that time be meetings. How many of you want to go to more meetings? Raise your hand. And also, according to some studies, sitting in meetings that aren't relevant to you is a big contributor to burnout, right?
Yeah.
So if we can save time, but also make a better work experience, hooray. Yeah. Joel.
Hi, my name is Joel Ramjohn, and I'm the president and founder of Agape Source. We're otherwise known as Orlando Welcome. And we exist to welcome migrant families and students that are coming to Central Florida, primarily from non-Western countries where they're coming here and they know nothing about our system. Most of them are short-term, where they're heading back after their program, and we just wrap around them. We become a home away from home for them. We share our life with them. They share their life with us. And whatever needs they might have, whether it's crises. During COVID, we were very busy working with them as well as their families back at home to helping them learn how to do their taxes. I have the wonderful privilege of representing all of the small grassroots nonprofits that are across our wonderful country. We have 3 in-house staff and about 37 volunteers. And a lot of the nonprofits that I get to work with, that I get to champion and help, are just like us. They are mom and pop shops with great passion, huge vision, but feel like they're just swimming upstream. And so it's a tremendous privilege to work with people like Beth, with Microsoft, with TechSoup, to be able to help these other nonprofits see that it is not that big or deep of an ocean, that we can do it if we do it together. And so for us, we have seen AI play a tremendous role within our organization in creating some of the gifts that we would have when a student comes over for the first time. We love giving them a welcome gift to America that will have some key things that they'll need. We actually design cups or a Christmas ornament that will help them remember their time here in America, beautiful trinkets, right? Something that they would want to keep and take home with them. All the way through in our accounting department, our fundraising. For me, having to manage all of our fundraising as well as the other administrative tasks, Copilot has been a phenomenal administrative assistant, being able to help me move things along at a much quicker rate so that I could do the other things that I'm involved with, whether it's changing a tire or running out to the airport to pick someone up.
Oh, that's really amazing. It's really a force multiplier, I think, for small organizations. I know you said you had 3 staff, but you also have a large volunteer group, and there's probably a lot of moving pieces that you would have to manage, but the AI is really helping you be efficient in that way, almost like adding staff.
Yes, definitely.
Great. So these are some really great examples of maybe individual use cases. That part of the getting started piece, because it begins with us. I think someone said this morning that that you can't micromanage somebody into adoption, and that you have to make that space for that individual experimentation so people can figure out like how do I work with the AI and where am I comfortable. So then kind of the next step on that journey, we start to shift it into organizational adoption, and this, there's a lot of concerns you may need to address with staff, having those conversations. Maybe there's a lot of challenges that might bubble up around that. So all of you have had great experience with this. So could you tell us a little bit about some of the challenges, how you solve those? Tell us what worked in your organization. So John, we'll begin with you.
Yes, so I think everybody is starting new in this space. That's the first point, and actually, to come at it as an organization, whether you're a small organization or a big organization, you're going into a learning phase. And that was one of the key first things, was acknowledging that and saying we're stepping into the unknown a little bit here. We've got some great partners that we're working with who can help us on this journey, but it's important that we start the journey. And so we set out identifying, across our sort of executive board, saying, right, are we all bought into this? And I was given accountability for the introduction of artificial intelligence and how we go about that. But also then thinking about what are those key use cases where we think AI can add value. And we identified 4 of those, which was how we can use it to engage with supporters, how we can help it with our nature conservation mission, how we can use it for security and resilience, and then importantly, what could it do to help us get fit for the future in terms of that productivity piece. And rather than us saying, well, this is what we're going to then do, we went out, we asked the audience, we said, to our teams, where do you think this technology can work? Where have you thought about using it? And we identified to come into the Microsoft pilot around M365 Copilot, 300 champions, if you like, across our organization, and somebody to lead that group to say, how can you work together as a cohort? And we intentionally selected people from a hugely diverse range of backgrounds, but also a diverse range of roles, everything from working in people services to working heavily in conservation or our curatorial staff. And so, well, how might that help you and make you more productive in your role so that you've got more time freed up to do the things that you really care about? And having identified those, what we found is there was a lot of anxiety amongst people, and these were the people who were really keen to get stuck into it, but they were still nervous about the technology because they felt they didn't really know how to do this, and they kept coming to us and say, what about more training? What about more training? There is no more training. We're going to learn as we do here. We're going to test and adjust as we go along. But it's fine. It's fine to not know all the answers at this stage, but learn from each other. And it was that sense of community, I think, that gave people that strength and confidence then to start experimenting, starting to try new things. And we saw in the chat groups to say, people were saying, hey, have you tried this? Have you seen this feature on here? And guess what that might be able to do for you? So that sense of collective learning and that, using champions so that when we push these capabilities out further across the organization, we've got an already built community who are confident or more confident in the use of them. And that, I think, will really help with that spread and adoption of these capabilities.
Right. And what John's describing for any of the change management geeks in the audience, you probably know this, it's called a bright spot strategy. And that's where you bring in the people who are most open to learning together, and they form a community of practice, is another word. And then instead of John having conversations with all the people around concerns, they start having conversations with their peers. And it can be a really effective way to address some of those conversations about fears. And we all have to get better at that. And the other thing, too, is being comfortable with not knowing the answer is kind of a shift, especially for technical people, because we're the tech experts, right? But nobody's an expert. Nobody has all the answers. Alex, what's your... what have you done in terms of organizational adoption?
So we started early last year, we started with an exec briefing and we brought in external speakers. We also, similar to what John was saying, we created an AI community, and we also created a steering committee as well. And so that meant when we were ready to roll out Copilot, we were in a really good place because we had that sort of infrastructure, and we've been able to use that steering committee and the community to help advise us in terms of who we bring on to the Copilot trial. We've again, completely agree with what you're saying, Beth. There are no answers. So rather than creating a policy, we've actually created a guidance so that people, and reflected the fact that it will be updated monthly as we learn more. And that's been really important. We've really stressed the responsible use element to our staff and try to join multiple policies together as well. So, we've got our security policy, we've got a data privacy policy. And so really just remind people, it's about responsible use and remember all these other policies. We've set a strategy for the next 12 months, again, capping it there so that, because again, we don't know what's going to happen. We're going to learn as we go. And then most importantly, it's about defining the use cases. So, we've got some really exciting use cases around, how we bring stock into the organization, but we just need to get moving and start proving it. And I think that the more we can show it, I think that will help with the kind of the fear. And then just finally, just in terms of the challenges, I talked this morning about the training. I think that there is, it's taken a lot longer than we thought. I thought that, you could just kind of give it to people and we'd all just be able to use it. As we've seen in some of the examples, you've got to know how to write the right question. But we're also using a lot of the reporting tools that come with Copilot to see who's using it. And if they aren't using it, it gives us an insight into to be able to go and have a conversation with them as to, why aren't you using it? Is it you need more training? Is it awareness? Is it that you, and also what are you using it for? So that's really helped with our insight.
That's right. So you can, have sort of a customized approach to your adoption strategy. And I mean, one thing we didn't mention, and maybe John, you can speak a little bit to this, is, what's the role of leadership? I mean, you're all leaders in your organizations. Do they have to put their hands on it?
Yeah.
How do they have to be champions?
It's hugely important that we lead for this technology, whether that's as a technology leader or whether that's just as a generalist user, consumer of the services. And I'm fortunate I've got some great exec colleagues who are really curious in this space. We have a board of trustees who are also interested in it because, let's be honest, you can't turn on a TV or read a newspaper without hearing something about AI. So everybody knows there is, a revolution going on. We're fortunate as an organization because we were actually formed on the back of the first industrial revolution. So we've sort of got some experience in this space and how you cope and move as an organization through those phases and impacts. But I think, being seen as a leader, being able to show the organization, this stuff's great, have confidence in it. Here's how to use it in a safe and secure way. one of the key things that we were sort of keen on is that we didn't want this sort of Wild West type approach where everyone just goes and does their own thing and says, let's go and, you know, have a look at ChatGPT or something like that. And instead, we said, well, look, if you use the Microsoft Copilot, that keeps our information safe and secure. That protects you from leaking this intellectual property or personal data or whatever that is you're worried about. And found that that relieved a huge amount of the concern and pressure from people, because they felt all of a sudden, oh, actually, it's okay to ask the AI engine these sort of things, because it's going to tell me or help me, but it's not going to absorb that information. And that was one of the key concerns.
So important to have leadership normalize its use versus ban it, because they're already using it. And that's where I think we can maybe get into trouble. So, so the leadership, the training, the bright spot, and I'll just give a shout out to, there's some terrific materials once you start exploring for Copilot and training. They have it in different channels, and there's an adoption manager channel that's pretty amazing. Okay, so we're sort of a little bit further along on this journey, and people have been trained, leadership is modeling it, you've addressed a lot of the concerns, they've gotten some basic training. Now the rubber meets the road. How do you get, it's called the challenge of transfer, right? So how do you get staff to like really integrate it into their everyday workflows? So I think I'll go to, he's looking away, Joel first.
Oh no, I'm always ready to talk. That's one of my problems. But we absolutely loved what AI has done for us as a small organization. We have an annual Christmas care package program that we do in Central Florida. We have about 200 Indian students that are out at UCF, as well as many other immigrants in the city, whether they're refugees or they're short-termers. And we come alongside them with a beautiful care package that has some food products, gifts, specific things to help them during that Christmas break. We all know that for Westerners, a lot of the other students get to go back home, right? They're in the States, they're going back home, and these students stay back on campus and they're isolated, and we try to make them feel welcome, that you're not alone. We're gonna have some parties, we're gonna do some fun things together. And I use ChatGPT as well as a few other tools to build out the care package. I had a $50 budget per person, and it curated the entire shopping list for us. And I was able to go get under budget while at the same token build out that entire purchasing that normally would take us a few weeks as a small staff to get it together. We had it done within a day of fine-tuning it. And then as we're shopping, I'm just asking, this product is not here, where can I find it? And it will take me to another local supermarket where I can get that item. So it has been, for us, as you said, a force multiplier, not just on the administrative side, but how we're able to better help those that we're serving.
You know, while we were prepping for this panel, you told a wonderful story about, because your organization has 3 staff members, but you also have a large, I want to say army of 50-ish or more of volunteers that help you with this work, whether they're doing some of the administrative tasks or they're actually interacting directly with the students. And you started training some of your volunteers to use some of these tools, and you did some really creative things. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I just make it fun. And so rather than having some white papers or, hey, let's sit down and do a training seminar, I tell them, take out your phone and let's have some fun with it. Why don't you role play? So one person will basically share where they're from, whether it's in the US or they are an immigrant like myself, and then ask it questions about where are you from, what kind of cuisine you would like to have. And so one of the biggest assets for AI for us is being able to help to care for someone that is from another culture, that comes to the US, they have to speak English, but a lot of times their English is still not proficient enough for some of the more complex things within our society here. And so we're able to have our volunteers learn how to have a translation tool right there with them to care for that person best, especially if they're in an emergency room or they're in some situation that is critical for that person or their family member in the other country that just does not speak English.
Great, thank you for that. And I know I pushed back on you and I was a little skeptical. I was sort of playing a skeptical. Does ChatGPT speak other languages really well? I mean, what was your experience?
It was actually, because we asked for feedback, it was actually spot on. There were a few minor nuances that it still needs work on, but for the most part, I think within a year or two, we're going to start seeing a lot more languages. Within Microsoft Teams, it has 40 languages. So if I'm doing a tax seminar on Teams, I could actually, as I'm speaking in English, I could have multiple cultures, up to 40 languages right now, that are able to follow with caption while I'm doing that teaching. So hopefully within, I would say, the next couple of years, we're going to see a lot more languages.
But right now we're co-piloting and there's still like the human touch at the end of it. Maybe it's
100%.
doing 80% of the work and then you're refining it. John, what about, this whole challenge of transfer in your organization from, learning it to actually applying it in your workflow?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, from a translation perspective, we're still waiting on the translation from English to Welsh. I think that might be a while yet, but we're hopeful. But I think for us, it's showing people, what's the benefit to them? How is this going to improve their working life? Mm-hmm. The key moment for me was when I saw the email chain summarization piece and started using that, and wow, that was transformative for me because all of a sudden I didn't have to read through these.
That's like a productivity vampire, isn't it?
Absolutely. But it'll be different for different people. So showing people, doing demos, doing those show and tell activities that say, like, did you know this is what's possible? That's why I'm so keen on the community of champions, because actually they're the people who can help because they know how to apply the technology in that particular role. So I think that, that's really important. I also, one of the other concerns that I've heard a lot, whether that's in my own organization or talking with people in other organizations, is this around, is this AI going to take my job? And it's a real, it's a thing that people are concerned about. And I think, I love Brad's example this morning about when he talked about as a lawyer in the 1980s, bringing his IBM PC to the office and people thinking, what is that? Why would anyone want to use a PC? But actually, if you think about that in the context of this revolution that we're going through with AI, it's the people who know how to bring their Copilot with them are going to be much more capable in their role. And so the AI won't displace them, but what they will find is it'll be, if they went to work and they didn't know how to use a PC or they didn't know how to use office automation capabilities, it'll be the same sort of challenge. If you don't know how to use AI productivity tools in the near future, then you're going to be at a disadvantage to others.
Great. So in the couple of minutes that we have left for our panel discussion before we move to the demo, quickly, and I'm going to put the panelists on the spot for a little bit here. Just really quickly, if you were to give it a tagline of practical advice, here we have a room full of nonprofit leaders who are going to probably be working on their organizational adoption strategy. What would that tagline of advice be? And who would like to start?
I could go out and just go down the row.
Yeah,
the tagline is going to be for organizations like mine that I could speak from, is we become small but mighty. I think it's just, yes, right? We're small but mighty, and that's what AI has done for us particularly.
I think in terms of a tagline, I think just start trying it. I mean, just do it. It's, there is so
Someone's got that one.
Yeah, I know.
That's a familiar tagline, huh?
But I mean, you've just got to try it and play around with it. And I think, you were talking about those examples. I mean, we turned that into a game within technology, because again, I realized that a lot of my team hadn't used any of the tools out there. So we actually created a competition to get people to use multiple tools to come up with it was like some kind of marketing campaign for something. And it all had to be generated by AI. But it was great, because it just got people using it, all the different types of tools out there.
I think for me, it's about getting the organization fit for the future. And so having that growth mindset that says, okay, it might not have a huge impact today, but if we want to be the organization we need to be to carry on our conservation mission for the next 129 years, then we've got to be fit for the future. And the AI revolution is here. And so actually by engaging with it and being a part of it and using it as a force for good will enable us to become that fit for the future organization.
That's really great. So I think I would just maybe try to sum this up in 40 seconds before we turn it over to the demo. I think a couple of insights, I was writing them down, that we have to really shift from being experts in what we know to being learners and adopt that sort of growth mindset, that learning mindset. It's really important to address the fears. Even if we've gotten over the fears, we have to bring everybody else along. And it's important that the people at the top put their hands on the technology, normalize it, bless it, whatever, along with the concerns and the responsible use and socializing ethical approaches. An interesting kind of strategy is this whole bright spot or champions, and I think you can even do that on a small level at a small organization with just a couple of folks, because it doesn't have to be you to be talking to other people and sharing different use cases. And then I think the big idea that I'm leaving with is learning, and this is a joyful journey. It's, I think there was a stat I saw from the sentiment research that Microsoft did of nonprofits that they were afraid of the steep learning curve and being overwhelmed. But I think this is a joyful journey. The technology's moving fast, but we can walk slowly and joyfully and reap some of these benefits. So thank you. So now we're going to have Alicia Martinez, who's going to demo some of the use cases that we've been talking about. Yes. So take it away.
Okay, can everyone? Yes. All right, good. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. When they told me I would have the opportunity to present, I was like, oh, great, let me get my jokes ready. But that was before I realized I was following Trevor Noah, so we're not doing any jokes. But I would instead like to be able to tell you the story and kind of paint the image of how Copilot is impacting the employee experience. I think that we talked about how important and how precious our time is. And I remember, there was a point where working super long hours equated to being productive. But then we got burnout and people were unhappy and not satisfied in the work that they were doing. And so now I think that we're in a space where we want to be productive. We want to be able to not sacrifice doing our work with doing our life and our interests and our responsibilities. And so today we're going to see how Copilot kind of help us do that. So I am in a scenario where I'm a business development specialist at a nonprofit organization. I have been out for a few days, enjoying vacation, not checking email, not checking Teams. But I know this is a critical time for my nonprofit because we're planning on expanding our digital literacy program for our senior students. I need to get caught up. I'm back at work. I need to get caught up on things that I missed. So let's see how Copilot can help me do that in the 10 minutes that I have with you. Okay, so it looks like there were some email threads that were happening around our grant proposal planning strategy. We could scroll through, but instead, let's see how Copilot with summarization can help us get up to speed really quickly. So Copilot can go through, scan this lengthy email, and when we look at our summary, what we'll see is not only has the information been highlighted at a near high level, when we scroll over to look at these little reference numbers, I can see and navigate in Copilot where that email resonated from if I wanted to look into a little bit more context. So when we're thinking about being able to use AI with Copilot, we're thinking about a simple mental flow. We're not going to take everything for granted. We do always have checks and balances in place where we can verify what's being said, what information that we're learning. So it looks like there was also a meeting that happened around this grant proposal strategy, and I missed it. And it looks like my friend Adele's going to schedule the meeting, and Christina's going to help me get caught up on the information that I was out. So let's see what we can find out with Copilot and if I go and navigate to that meeting. In Microsoft Teams, I'm greeted with the recording of the meeting that happened while I was out. And on the recap tab, I can see, wrong meeting. On the recap tab, I can see the conversation that was had, as well as some highlights of when the speakers were talking. I can scroll down and I can see when Christina, Adele, and Richard made comments, as well as some pre-generated AI notes. This looks pretty okay. I don't see my name mentioned, so I wonder if there was anything that was specific to me. I can use Copilot to take this summarization, this recap a little bit deeper and ask some specific questions to the meeting that happened while I was out. So we'll ask Copilot to summarize this meeting and describe the tone of the meeting while I was away. Oh. Perfect. Yeah, it would not be a demo if something did not go wrong. So let's see. Okay, there we go. Summarize this meeting and list my action items, as well as describe the tone of this meeting. So Copilot can go through and understand the transcript, the recording, the tone of the speakers that happened during this meeting, and give me a concise summary. And what we'll see is, while we did have some generated AI notes and some useful information and content, we are getting a much deeper, much more involved experience when we're coming into Copilot. So similarly to our email experience, I can hover over each of the highlighted points in the keynotes that Copilot has summarized for us, and I could navigate to that part of the recording if I wanted to learn how that message was delivered or take it a little bit deeper. So we've talked about how successful our program was in the past. Let's look at what my action items were. So it looks like I have to catch up with the meeting details and the files shared by Richard and Christina. I need to work on the grant proposal with Christina and Richard using the financial data and the documents they provided. The tone of this meeting was positive and cooperative. The participants expressed agreement, gratitude, and excitement throughout the meeting. I am so happy that everybody is this excited. Let's take a look at some of the files that were shared during this call and see if I have everything that I need to get started with my first draft. Okay, so first it looks like we have our list of requirements to submit for this draft, so make sure I'm not forgetting anything. February 15th, we got some time. And we also have some financial information about how our program has used grant funds in the past. Okay, I think that I have enough. Let's see how long it'll take me to do our first draft with Copilot. So I navigate to Copilot in Word, and I ask Copilot to draft a grant proposal for my nonprofit digital literacy program. Use the data provided in the documents to detail how funds were used in the past and the success of previous cohorts. The draft should be persuasive and show how the requested funds will be used for the program expansion. Include details on the importance of digital literacy and Contoso's commitment to serving its community. Let's see what files Copilot can find for us. Okay, so we have our grant requirements, and we have our program outline. All right. Once you've given Copilot a task and decided which files you want it to reference, now that I'm thinking about it, I think there might be some additional information I could include in this first draft. Let's see how Copilot on the web can provide supplemental information in addition to the data that we're already referencing in this draft. Okay, so we'll go for Copilot in the web, and we'll keep it side by side so we can see Copilot in Word do its thing. And I'll tell Copilot, I'm writing a grant proposal to support my nonprofit organization's digital literacy program for seniors 65 plus. How can I measure the effectiveness of this program? When we're thinking about submitting a grant proposal, we need to be able to detail exactly how we're going to be using the funds that are being requested. Ooh, it's okay. If you guys wanted to, give it some encouragement, Copilot's it's gonna show up the way that it needs to. Okay, let's try this again. Perfect. There we go. Okay, so when we're writing our grant proposal, we need to be able to articulate exactly how the funds we're requesting are going to be used, how successful our program has been in the past, and what we're going to do to measure the effectiveness of this expansion. So let's see what Copilot can find on the web that I could potentially include in my first draft.
So is that publicly available information of your project?
So what I'm asking for now is how other organizations measure the effectiveness of digital literacy programs. Broad knowledge, not specific to my organization. And so Copilot has provided a couple of resources. Let's look at this first one. The Digital Literacy Program for Seniors and the Essential Digital Skills Framework. It looks like this was published by the World Health Organization. I think this might be useful in measuring the effectiveness of our grant proposal, of our program, excuse me. Let's see what Copilot has from on the grant proposal side and see if I can find a way to work this in there. Okay, so in the matter of, we'll say a couple of seconds, Copilot has completely generated a first draft of a potential grant proposal for me. We see that it's 5 pages. There's an executive summary, an introduction. It's formatted to match my program description, as well as including any information relevant to digital literacy and how we've been making an impact in my community. So in the program impact section, maybe that's the best place where I can include the WHO framework. So let's see. We'll keep it. And with Copilot, I'll say, insert a section leveraging the digital literacy framework published by the World Health Organization. The framework will be used to measure the effectiveness of our program. And another really cool thing about Copilot is I'm not saying anything super deeply technical. My prompts even aren't very long sometimes. And yet Copilot is able to put together the reasoning, the context of the information that I'm requesting and include it into my document in a seamless way, in a way that makes sense. Perfect. I didn't have to type any of that. So for the context of today, we'll say that this is a pretty solid first draft. And because I've inserted something new, and Richard and Adele were not aware of the inclusion of this framework, I think I'm going to reach out to them to say, hey guys, I have my first draft. Let's set up some time to discuss it and get their thoughts. We'll come back over to Outlook. We'll do our reply all. And I was really hoping that Jared was going to announce we could do the Sound Like Me feature, but he did not. So we're going to draft with Copilot and just say, hey, let the team know that I have my first draft ready, and I'm thinking about including this framework published by WHO, and we'll have Copilot generate. Let's keep it casual. I'm still on vacation mode. We'll keep it short, keep it cute, and we'll click generate. And not sure if that was 7 minutes or 10 minutes, but we have a whole 5-page document, a brand new framework to include in our program expansion evaluation, and in a few short seconds, our email to get started back with the team.
Thank you so much for that demo. Thank you. So
I think we're ready for Q&A. I think we have about 11 or 12 minutes. So if folks have questions, we have microphones around the room. So please step up and ask our esteemed panel a question. I have a couple of questions that I can ask, but I hope we get some questions soon enough. But why don't we get started? I mean, one question that has been coming up in more and more conversations, and Beth, you literally wrote the book on this, so I'm gonna direct this question to you first. But as we see more and more of these tasks getting automated, how do we make sure that humans are staying at the center of these decisions and not feeling like we're just working with robots generating? How do we make sure that humans stay in control?
That's a great question. As I was watching the demo, I was half amazed and half a little like thinking about, okay, how do I, if I was managing my team, how would I make sure that, that they're actually talking to each other and giving feedback and not having, the joke is that they would have, each one would have Copilot give the feedback to each other and leave the humans out of the loop. But I think what Afua was talking about this morning, and I wrote it down, keep the humans in the loop. And I think about, for those of you who have worked in fundraising, and there's the donor journey, the customer journey, like what are the different touch points till we get to for the gift? I think we need to think about that in terms of workflow, especially as a manager. When do I pick up the phone? When do we actually just talk about it face to face? And I also think, and Amy Sample Ward has, I don't know if she's here, but, oh, hi, Amy. Amy's N10 policy always says the humans always have the last words on things, right? We don't cut the humans out because we're using this stuff to make more time for human conversation. Because I could imagine then having the time, the bandwidth, to have that meeting and have the draft and having a deeper conversation and incorporate those ideas and that creativity into that next draft, which should hopefully get us a more impactful grant application or whatever it is that we're working on.
Yeah. Does anyone have anything? Okay. I see someone's over there at the mic.
There's also someone over there.
We have one.
Test, this is working.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Jen Prudhomme Booker. I am the Director of Business Development for One Step Initiative. It is a nonprofit organization that brings study abroad opportunities to underserved youth that don't have the means to travel abroad. I love the demo. I have a couple questions. So if I think about how we operate, especially around developing our grant proposals, we always get those second, tertiary, and even other layers of questions from mentors and board members that say, hey, can you take your proposal another layer or level on this particular question? So the refinement aspect of the proposal. How do you suggest using Copilot to come back to that draft and refining some of the feedback that you get from your stakeholders in your organization?
Okay. Want me to take a shot at it?
Sure.
Okay, so I think, is the mic not? Okay. I think what I'm hearing is what are the different ways that the human can be in the loop with the technology, right? Is that what you're asking?
How are you, after that draft was created, how are you now refining? If you have questions, because a lot of us will have either board members or stakeholders that say, hey, go a little deeper on this topic.
And Beth, Alicia's coming up on stage to help us with that answer.
Yeah, so one of the things that we saw when we were working with Copilot is I chose to keep it, but I could always regenerate it. Or there's a sidebar experience where you can work with a document that exists. The demo today showed creating a document from scratch, but you could take that same document that exists already and you can interact with Copilot to say, maybe focus on this section, make the verbiage a little bit sharper, input the changes that you would like it to make. And then see what it comes up with. You might have to do it maybe a few times, but the idea is it can do that broad first, even revision for you, and you still will probably have to go in and make sure the verbiage is exactly the way that you want it to have it. So it's a supplemental. It's not going to do it 100% for you, but you still have the ability to take it layers deeper.
I think we're over here, and then we'll come right here in the middle.
Good afternoon. My name is Michel Pouliot. I'm the executive director of a place called the Children's Foundation in Vancouver, Canada. A couple questions. The first one is, does Copilot integrate with Excel and help us leverage the data analysis there? And then my second question is for each member of the panel. What are your top 3 or top 2 AI tools they use on a regular basis? Because I'm looking for, some depth in terms of what other tools are out there.
Yes, so I can take the Excel piece. Copilot will interact with Excel. As it stands today, it will cover all of your Office applications. Potential use case with Excel is having Copilot convert your analysis and your charts into visual data, as well as being able to draft proposals or budgeting statements or programs based on financial information, having Copilot reference those Excel spreadsheets.
And sorry, the second part of that question was specific tools, was that?
The panelists, what are some use cases or top 3 scenarios you guys use your AI for?
Well, for me as a small nonprofit, it's definitely Copilot that we're using in-house. We're also using Adobe Creative Cloud, which helps us to generate, there's Adobe Firefly as well as Essentials that we're using for content creation. And then Einstein on Salesforce is what we're using as well.
So for us, we're predominantly using Copilot. We've also got ChatGPT as well. And then, yeah, we'll use specific, for specific use cases. We're also exploring the use of Power Platforms and how we can hook that in to create much more of a kind of integrated experience. But it depends on what the use case is, really.
I think I'll pick a slightly different example in that for us, we see huge opportunity for AI to be able to help us interpret huge quantities of data, be that data about nature, the environment, our collections, all of those things that, you know, the scale and scope of it is just too massive for people to be able to do that effectively. So I see a huge opportunity there for us in that data interpretation and exploitation.
And we have a visual on that. If we could maybe show folks. Can we
I'm not
pull
sure.
up that? Do we have a quick? Yeah.
Oh, we do.
Okay,
there.
so yeah, do you want me to?
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
There we go.
There we go. So this is just a very brief example of where we can do this. This is an example of where, working with it in partnership, we were able to take data from old mapping from, you know, the 1890s through to the early part of the, you know, the 20th century, and interrogate that to say, in England and Wales, where have we seen the loss of orchards? So orchards are mapped on, you know, Ordnance Survey maps or other maps, so very clearly defined. And why is that important? As part of the work we do is looking at the biodiversity and habitats and habitat losses. For those of you who don't know, the UK, the state of nature in the UK is in a terrible state. We're in the 10 lowest countries globally in terms of biodiversity and the state of nature. And so that's why this is important. But what the AI was able to do here was to show, because the data doesn't lie, that there's been, you know, up to a 70% reduction in blossoming orchards in England and Wales. And that's a huge impact on the biodiversity that used to thrive in those environments and that is no longer there. And you know, in terms of that, the impact on pollinating insects and all of those things. We couldn't do that with people, or we could. It would probably take them 100 years to go through all of the data, and AI is able to do that in ways that people just can't.
Okay, we have about 2 minutes. We have two folks asking questions. We'll do our best to get through it. I think I saw you first.
Yeah, I'll try and be quick. So my name's Tom Moore. I'm CIO at the Nursing and Midwifery Council in the UK. John, you mentioned in your piece around adoption that you're lucky that you've got some senior execs who are curious. Any hints and tips if you've got senior execs who maybe aren't quite as curious as your ones?
Apart from find a different organization, no. I think it's important because I think a lot of people are curious, but not everybody sees the potential benefits in this. And it's that combination of curiosity and seeing the business opportunity that AI brings. I think those execs that would say, oh, we're not doing AI, you know, they're kidding themselves. I think I do hear from a few organizations that say we've just told people they're not allowed to use AI. So guess what? Everyone is using AI, but they don't know about it.
But I also think, too, and the May Garlinghouse is doing a session tomorrow on it, and I think it's going to become important for a talent recruitment strategy, because if your organization is not using AI, and the workforce is, that might not be a great work experience,
Yeah.
right?
But you've got to engage with people who are perhaps less, or less enthusiastic and a little bit more doubtful. So how do you bring them on that journey? And actually, showing people the potential benefits is so powerful.
So I did that with our exec. I had individual meetings with each of them and just went through some of the use cases. This was with ChatGPT before Copilot. And with each one, they all asked different questions. They were coming at it from a different way. And yeah, I think that individual tailoring it, thinking about what's in it for them, I think is absolutely critical. Completely agree.
Okay, let's try to squeeze in this last question. We're just at time, but let's try to do it.
I'll keep it short. Anand Kopikar, I head IT at the American Institutes for Research. So it's a question of adoption. So when you have about 2,000 staff and they run the gamut on tech-savvy knowledge, some are relative Luddites, and did introducing Copilot actually get the less tech-savvy to want to be more tech-savvy? In the sense, we've had Teams, all the whole Microsoft suite for quite some time. And we find people just use a few things because that's what they're familiar with. And would Copilot actually get them to learn more and to want to learn more and do more in the Microsoft realm, because that's going to get the most out of Copilot for them? Have you found that?
I don't mind going on that one. I mean, I think there's a snowball effect. I think that so we're finding that we need to roll more people out onto Copilot. We're just about to hit our 300 users, and that's helping get the momentum to get the other people to want to use it, because they're seeing people use it, particularly with the meeting recaps. We have a lot of meetings at BHF, and now seeing, being able to see how quickly it can do the minutes and the actions, and people are catching up on it. They're talking about it, and it breeds that curiosity. So I think the more, we were talking about the champions, I think the more you can get those people talking about it, creating that community of practice, I think it will naturally bring others to that. I mean, there'll still be the people that will resist it, but I think the more it can become commonplace, the better. But I think what we found is you need to get a bit of a critical mass going.
I think just to answer that, sorry, go for it.
Well, we've had 100% adoption within a week. You're looking at 3 staff, but close to 50 volunteers. However, unlike any other software that we have with the org, it's benefiting the org, right? But with AI, it's benefiting the staff. And so our staff loved it, and the volunteers loved it, because it was an actual assistant that they had with them. And that, I think, is the difference versus when we shifted from Google Suite to Microsoft, that Teams and whatnot. It was just, that was hair pulling. But this has been an absolute breeze for us.
All right.
I think very quickly on that, I'd say that we're going through this process of having to unlearn a little bit before we really learn. What do I mean by that? We've spent years teaching people how to write very specific queries into things like search engines. And now we're saying, you don't need to bother with that. Just use natural language. Speak to it as though you would speak to, a person, and it will help you. But that's a skill that people are having to relearn. And so once people become confident in that, I think it will open up. It'll make it much more accessible as a technology, and people will become a lot more comfortable with it.
That's great. So there's been a lot of learning on this panel, and we have to do some unlearning, and I'm sure there's many other questions, but we are now out of time. So thank you, everybody, and a big hand for our panelists and Alicia.